Another little bunch. Put another knot in there. There we go. I'm going to trim this off. Okay. All we have left are the tabs. So just taking the tab, each tab, snipping it off where it's been cut. So snipping those off. Just being careful. I try to pull them away from the jig so that you don't cut the other skirt tabs. Pull these away. I'm gonna take this, trim this up just a little bit. See how this looks. So then take our skirt, you want to try to see how it's kind of all bunched up, and some of the tabs I haven't cut far enough down. Making sure everything's laying flat on side of the hook, and so you can see where if you need to move any of the skirt material. Have a little gap there, so I'm working the skirt material over. And when I'm talking about gaps, you're looking right here if there's a gap where it's not even as far as strands going across. So there's our little jig, swim jig, and typical shad color, but I put a little extra of that glittery type material in there. Real interested in that. So now what I do is I pull all this tight, real tight. All real tight. So then I'm just going to trim it. Going to go everywhere. And the swim jig, I might have to trim. I probably have to trim it again because we're putting a blade on this, and the skirt's not going to be really long. It's not going to be as long as, say, a football jig or arky jig type thing. So now we are going to get our blade ready. What I need, a little piece of wire, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches long. What I have to do first is put on a swivel. So I take my wire, I don't know, 1/2 inch, give it a little bend. You can see that swivel on there. Take my swivel, pinch it. Now I twist them together. Secure it in there. Just straighten it all out. So now we have our swivel attached to our piece of wire. This is a 22 gauge wire. It's real flexible, stainless steel. So what we do next, take our jig, Gonna pull all our strands down over the head so we can get to the collar. Tighten that guy in there, and then I like to use clothespins because that silvery stuff is. All right, so pull real tight. Clothespins. I may even use 2. Make sure it holds down in there. There we go. The clothespins, obviously, you can see, hold the skirt out of your way. What I do next is kind of measure. Always error if you're going to do this. The length here, because you can. I'll show you where you can wrap it around the hook, the end of the hook here, to move the length back and forth. So I typically go about inch and a half from here, from the top of the hook, the curve of the hook, the length of the wire, about an inch and a half. Then I go all the way down to where the wire is at the collar. So I kind of mark that and I put a bend in it. That's where I'm going to wrap. So I take that in there and I start the collar closer to the end of the hook, away from the head, and then I start wrapping. Trying to pull as tight as I can using my pliers. Pulling that around. Again, trying to get it as tight as possible. Get a few wraps in there. And we're looking good. So then I just trim this off. Bend that wire in there so there's no, it's not sticking out. Now I'll take this part, the length, and wrap it around the hook. Gotta hold that because it'll twist. Wrap it around the hook like twice. And work it so that it's out like that. That looks like a good distance right there from the hook up to the swivel, the end of the swivel. And we also have our ring we have to put on. Okay, got my ring on here. So now I have my willow leaf blade. This is a number 4 blade. So I'm going to put that on the ring also. Work that around. Let's see. Swivel, ring, blade. Take my clips off. And there we go. Now the important part here with the skirt is making sure the skirt doesn't interfere with this movement here. So making sure we trim it. Again, tighten up the skirt and trim it just enough that the, see how this, you can see the swivel and the ring. That's usually where I trim it to, and I haven't seemed to have problems with it. as far as catching and inhibiting the spinning of the blade. So all we have left is to put some coating on the, well, actually we're going to put the weed guard on first, and then we are going to put some coating on. Now we're going to put the weed guard in there, and I use a 2-part epoxy. What I typically do is just get a little scrap piece of plastic or something and put it in there and stir it up with a popsicle stick, and then we'll dip it in there. So I'm going to do that down here real quick. A little epoxy. Typically I'll do multiple, maybe 10 jigs or something like that at a time. So then I just stir it up real quick. Make sure you stir real good, mix the two parts. I mean, it doesn't take a whole, I mean, literally a drop. Kind of wasting here, but this is just for the video. And typically I'll do several jigs, even with this just tiny little amount. Do lots of jigs. And then we just take our, a lot of times, I don't know if you can see on there, there's little fuzzies. You got to make sure those are off because they kind of mess it up a little bit. So we just take, I mean, you can see just a tiny bit on there. Take our jig, pop it in there. And that's another thing with the powder coating, as far as when I spoon it and shake it on there, I mean, barely any gets in there, and you can see it just popped in there. It's actually makes it just perfectly tight, and it's perfect. So now I would let that dry. This epoxy dries, it says 5 minutes, so I just give it a little bit of time. I don't know, I may give it an hour or so, and let it dry, and then we're going to put some clear seal on there. Kind of deal. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll be back for the clear seal. Last part, seal coat. And I just use these cheap old dollar store paintbrushes, and we're going to just put some on there. Especially I start with the eyes, paint on the eyes, get a good coat in there, and then make sure I get some inside the at the edge right here of, you can see right there, of the weed guard. It helps to kind of fully cement that in there. Again, get some inside that weed guard area. And this stuff is really good, really durable. Just get a nice even coat, and I'll put 2 to 3 coats on there. Once again, I will run a paper clip through there. I just got a big one here. The eye, just wipe that off. And there we go. There's one coat done. And I'll let that dry. And this dries really quick, so maybe like 10 minutes. I'll put another coat, probably 3 coats on there. So we'll let that dry. I always stand it upright like that. Let it dry, so if it does drip, it'll drip down in towards that collar. And that's about it. So I would just put two more coats on there, and that's done. That about wraps it up for today. For my 3rd video on this swim jig, and he's drying here. 3rd coat of clear coat on him, and to really hold those eyes on. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe you've learned something. That'd be great. Please comment, leave any comments, or please subscribe, please like, all that stuff, and visit my website, www.crawfishcreekcustomlures.com. Appreciate it. Thanks. Have a great day.